moving to thing three, talking GDP. GDP revised down. We had an adjustment there. Congress set on destroying more value.
Yeah.
Great headline that every American should be really happy about.
Yeah, right. So if we have to sum this one up, it is that the GDP is a fake number, and we have a government set on destroying as much of it as possible. Congratulations. This is not so great. But again, we told you it was going to be a super cranky version of the five things of people doing, unwise things. Um, so look, one of the things we've talked about a lot at DKI is the tendency of government agencies to report favorable numbers on the announcement day when everybody's looking, and then a month or two later, when no one's paying attention, they revise them in an unfavorable direction. And we just got that again, with fourth quarter GDP, it was revised down from 3.3% to 3.2%. Now, does that matter? Nope, it doesn't. I don't really care. And, anybody who's looking at this, I will assure you that the government is not capable of measuring economic activity in a country this size to within a tenth of a percentage point. So why does this matter? The key thing here is that the GDP is now a completely faked number. Government spending is additive to GDP, whether it produces value or not. And, the old example is you could pay half the country to dig holes, the other half to fill up those holes. You've created nothing of value, but everybody who's digging holes and who's filling holes, when they get paid by the government, that adds to GDP. So it's an old example, but it's a good one because it shows how GDP can be increased by government spending without creating any value. Now, what's happening right now is Congress is overspending by $2 to $3 trillion a year. There have been a ton of stories in the press over the last week on how we are adding $1 trillion of debt every 90 to 100 days, right? Okay, that is a massive amount. We're way past $2 trillion of overspending here. But all of that spending gets added to GDP. And so, basically our government has decided to fund itself through money printing and additional debt instead of taxes. And that gives the incorrect appearance that everything is free, right? We can have guns, butter, and everything else, right? Whatever we want. All we have to do is just print more dollars. So what we're basically doing is we are paying for excessive spending through inflation. And so we're looking at these huge increases in debt and this recent big increase in GDP and saying, wait a minute, this is fake. This isn't accurate. And basically the Congress is buying favorable GDP numbers at the cost of your loss of spending power. Right. So when you go next month or next quarter to buy something, you say, oh my God, how are prices up again? This is how we're paying for government overspending and the high GDP, which again is fake.
I know the answer to this question will not be simple, but as an American consumer, right, and sure I voice the same sentiments of a lot of viewers. It's like we've been talking about inflation for what seems like a long time, right? Since we've even started working together, Gary. It's like when does it stop, right? When do we see things curbed, or when do we get it back? Is there even a route, right? I was looking at car insurance the other day up for renewal,
Oh yeah.
$2,000 for 6 months on my policy for this upcoming year, right? But so I guess yeah, just when does it stop, or what is the path to get us out? Because it just seems like a spiraling case, and we just keep going further and further down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. So Rob, unless you're driving $1 million Ferrari at 200 miles an hour, that's $4,000 a year seems like a lot for car insurance.
So yeah, I actually normally the car insurance is, hey, that's a line item, you got to account for it. It was one that caught my eye. Good buddy of mine's my broker, and sent me a video kind of explaining these prices that are now getting baked in that hadn't got baked in 2000, 2001, and so forth, when insurance premiums were lower because not as many people were driving. Obviously, we had the stimulus coming out, right? So yeah, I'm still looking into that a little bit more, but it did shock me and made me pause.
Yeah, my home insurance, those prices are up 20% compounded for each of the last 2 or 3 years, and I don't even drive my house. right? So I can't speed in it. But yeah, it's a huge problem. And by the way, when you look at the insurance aspects of the CPI, we're not looking at 20% compounded. These numbers are a lie. But Rob, you're asking the right question, which is when does it get better? And I have really bad news. Again, here's your trigger warning, everyone. This is your super cranky version of the 5 things. It's actually going to get worse, and here's why. We had our intern Andrew Brown, who's doing a great job from the University of Tennessee, put together a chart this week. And let me tell you what's going on. And I'm eyeballing this because I'm looking at a chart. Okay. So this is, these numbers aren't exact, but the second quarter of 2023, we had GDP growth of about $1.5 trillion. Okay, that's pretty good. But increase in government debt, that was about $1.8 trillion. There's a trend here. The following quarter, third quarter, GDP growth of about 1.6 trillion. Again, I'm eyeballing a chart. It's not exactly right. Government debt growth of about 2.3 trillion. And then this last quarter, GDP growth of about 1.5 trillion, which itself is a respectable number, but government debt up more than $2.5 trillion. And so that's your government spending. And basically, you have to draw one of two conclusions, and neither one is a pleasant one. The first conclusion, which is the one that I agree with, is that a dollar of government spending produces much less than a dollar worth of GDP, of actual economic growth. So every time the government's spending money, they are wasting money, they're destroying value, because that's what we see. If you have government debt up by 2.5 trillion and produce $1.5 trillion of GDP growth, then what that tells you is that the government is destroying value. And it's true. All they're doing is pulling demand forward, right? This is the equivalent of living off of massive amounts of credit card debt and pretending like you'll never go bankrupt and saying, look, I made money. You didn't make money. You just pulled forward demand and spending. The other conclusion that you could draw, if you're very enthusiastic about government spending, and there are people who are, I don't agree with them, but they're entitled to their opinion. They might say, no, government spending produces tons of value, and, there's a multiplier. And, there are people who say a dollar of government spending produces $2 of GDP growth, or GDP value. Okay, fine. Let's accept that. Here's what we have. We have an increase last quarter of $2.6 trillion of debt. Let's just round down 2.5. So what we should have seen, if those people are right, is somewhere between 2.5 and $5 trillion of economic growth. We got $1.5 trillion of economic growth. So for the people who are
inverse.
yeah, exactly. So for the people who are enthusiastic about government spending, then the only conclusion that you can draw is that the private economy is in a massive recession, producing trillions of dollars of negative growth, right? That the private sector is contracting by trillions of dollars, and the GDP in the real non-government economy is collapsing. Now, so you either have to accept the fact that our government is wasting money and going to continue doing so at an accelerating pace, in which case, Rob, the inflation is going to get worse, not better, or you have to conclude that we are in a massive, massive, massive recession, and huge amounts of government spending funded by debt are supporting it. Either way, it's not a good outcome here.
No doubt.